Okay. All right. I think the mic is working. I'm on a good streak here. All right. So I think you saw my title, and my title was Scientists and Academics Are Mostly Mentally Ill. So if this isn't apparent to people right now, then, good luck. Uh, Good luck out there. I made this video because, not only can I glean this from just personal interactions over the years in mass media, but I've been dealing with these people lately. So you guys have followed this probably know, I'm an acupuncturist. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, and that's my main deal. So I've got a scientist in my practice, and the guy does suffer from mental health. Now, my caveat here, which I shouldn't have to say this, but people are so fucking black and white from biblical indoctrination. Mental illness is a real thing. Mental illness should not be shamed. It should be dealt with, blah, 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 right? It's a real thing. Um, you know, these people should be treated with dignity, but here's the fucking problem. Scientists and academics, and there's huge overlap between the two. Scientists and academics, they're the new clergy for people who are too fucking smart for church and religion and all that stuff. In academia as we know it, it was created by Christianity. The first academics were Christian monks. And what they did was, as Western society was getting sick of being ruled by the church and the monarchs, the royals that the church had installed in the Christian era, the church and the royals needed something to take the heat off them. So I need to make a video about royalty, about what they were like before Christianity, because now we have all these, that's like a brat, that's like a smart ass brat American thing, is to just like ridicule the idea of monarchy or royalty. But the version of that we have recent contact with in the last 1500 years, they were installed by the church. The church, the institution of Christianity, found the greediest, most bottom-feeding, chamberlains and ministers that worked for the old kings and queens, and they bribed them to overthrow those kings and queens, those pre-Christian kings and queens, those pagan kings and queens. And they became the new kings and queens, and they were, just completely greedy, money grubbing, and just on a total power trip. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent already. But so the Christian royals in the Christian church, they were getting heat from the populations that didn't want to be ruled by them anymore. So they allowed for the Renaissance, for the so-called Enlightenment, and for, just secularization of society. So then they basically, they informally deputized this new class of lay academics. So academics, professors that were non-clergy. And so they were deputized by the institution of Christianity, and they eventually took the role over. So they're a priesthood of scientism, because as we've seen, science is not about questioning things and putting things to the test. It's about faith. We saw this during the Wuhan cooties so-called epidemic. Trust the science. Well, science is not a thing to be trusted. It's a tool to test things with. So they're a corrupt, degenerate priestly class at this point. Now, like I said, mental health should not be held against people, but when you put yourself out there as a fucking messiah, and these scientists and these academics, not all of them, but it's at the very least a preponderance. It is a majority of them. They put themselves out there as these fucking messiahs who are going to save the unwashed masses from themselves, and they're going to save the earth from the unwashed masses with their moral superiority and their superior intellectual abilities. So they put themselves out this way. Once you put yourself out as that, if you can't fucking back it up, you're going to get torn apart and you're going to get exposed for, being a hypocrite and, being a charlatan, basically. And that's what these people are like. They're completely, they're socialism fanboys. They're fanboys of fucking Pol Pot, Mao, Trotsky, and Lenin, and Stalin. And they cover it with saying, "Well, we're all about the working class." You don't know how the fucking working class lives because they're in academic ivory towers. They have no idea. Some of them grow up working class, but you get into the ivory tower, you forget what it's like. So what they really are is they use, they're socialist fanboys and they're elitists. And that's why they gravitate towards socialism, because they think they're going to be within the socialist hierarchy. So they're total fucking elitists. They hate the working class. The working class is despised by the establishment. And academia is part of that. Majority of them are like that. But the problem is they talk like they're going to save the world, and they're these condescending elitists. But they're completely fucking mentally ill. Before they're mentally ill, they're hypocrites because they talk a big egalitarian game, but they are complete fucking elitists. They're like, they have this attitude of the unwashed masses just don't get it like we do. And then on top of this, they are fucking mentally ill. So I had a patient who, retired academic, semi-retired, and he was out due to, a legitimate crisis involving mental health. Now, whatever. Just don't act like a fucking messiah. Don't profess yourself to be one. Now, where the rub came into this whole thing, he basically has a fellow scientist who's younger who cares for him, who, helps him out, with things, just looking, watching over his finances, helping him out, that kind of thing. Well, this other scientist, I don't see this guy for a few weeks. I'm wondering what's going on. Can't get into a hospital to visit him. And, I've finally get contacted by this caretaker, this younger scientist. And it's like a big fucking secret. And I'm asking, okay, what's going on? What happened? Oh, well, he's just going to have to tell you. And it's like, this younger scientist didn't have the ability to say, it's a very personal thing. I don't want to talk about it. Oh, I'm getting cat bombed here. Cats always love to be in videos. Hi, Millie. So when I ask a question about a third party and the person I am in conversation with says, well, it's a very personal issue, I don't want to get into that. All you have to say to me, I'm going to shut up right there. I'm going to stop pulling the thread. I'm going to stop asking more questions when I hear that. It's a very personal matter. That's code for, I don't want to talk about it. It's too personal. You have to get the story direct. I'm a reasonable guy, but I don't kiss ass. I don't feel grateful to be condescended to by some wacko feminist scientist who thinks she can just boss me around like I'm a child. I'm not that fucking guy. I don't smoke enough weed. I'm not a hippie or a hippie sympathizer. Um, I don't partake in or spectate the oppression Olympics. I didn't oppress her, so I don't owe her a fucking apology for being born with male plumbing. So yeah, not playing that game. So yeah. So this scientist who's gonna fucking save the unwashed masses from themselves, who's gonna save the earth, the unwashed masses, doesn't have the basic human communication skills to say it's a very personal matter. I don't want to get into it. Just makes it out like it's a big secret. And just going, I can't talk about it. You have to get the story. You have to get the story direct. You know, it turns into a command where all you have to say is it's a personal matter. So yeah, I'm not a fan of these people, you know, and it's funny. I'm from Massachusetts, and it's the land of 100 colleges. We have 100 colleges. It's like, yeah, did you graduate from them all? It's like, Jesus Christ. You know, I got plenty of people in my family who love to kiss these people's asses and, you know, like treat them like they're messiahs. And it leads me to a whole other tangent. I got to make a video about Jesus sometime. There's nothing more codependent than a messiah. If you're not familiar with the term codependence, what codependence is, it's when you get your self-worth from the approval of others. So, and that's all wrapped up in the whole Jesus story. You know, he's like supposedly saved billions of people who never asked to be saved. And the rudest thing you can do is save people who haven't asked to be saved. It's highly codependent. You know, it's like he's the biggest daddy's boy that's ever lived. And you know, he's actually like a rich boy because he gets abused by his dad, so because he's terrified he's not going to get his inheritance. So yeah, not a fan of messiahs. It's messiahs are like the saddest thing ever. It's complete codependency. It's complete narcissism. You know, it's scientifically speaking, it's what's called a communal narcissist. It's when people are all wrapped up in their egos. Their ego is out of balance. You need an ego to live in this world. This whole new age spiritual thing about, I just gotta like kill my ego, man. It's fucking bullshit. You need an ego to survive. So, but yeah, an out of balanced ego will do that. They'll be like, I'm all about the community. I'm all about helping other people. And when you don't play their games, they get all pissed off and they get fucking abusive, you know, psychologically, physically, whatever. Yeah, martyrs are extremely toxic. Anybody who sets out to save and redeem people who have not asked to be saved and redeemed are martyrs. Self-appointed messiahs are martyrs. So, yeah. So, you know, back really to the point. How can these people be messiahs to the unwashed masses and to the earth herself if they don't have basic fucking communication skills? You know, and that's a real problem with people who they have the codependency where they get their self-worth from how intellectual they are, how smart they are. They're so wrapped up in that, in what little factoids they know, that they totally miss the point with human beings. They don't know how to communicate with them, and most importantly, they don't know how to listen to human beings. You know, it's like, fucking don't get me started. But yeah, you know, Actually, while I'm on the roll, something I've heard from a family member over the years is you know what the problem is with people? It's self-love. They love themselves too much. It's like you gotta be fucking kidding me. That's the most toxic thing in the world is to not love yourself because when you don't love yourself, you don't only become a codependent, you become like a dangerous, toxic codependent. All the horrible things in the world in history are a result of people not loving themselves. So, communism, Nazism, Bolshevism, crusaders, witch hunters, jihadists. They're all people who deep down they hated themselves. They did not love themselves. When you love yourself, you're not a selfish, egotistical asshole. You have boundaries, you have lines you will draw where you won't let people just like consume you. You hold something back for yourself. You have to get something out of life. If you don't get anything out of life, it's like it's a huge wasted opportunity. You have to have a payoff. We all have responsibilities, but having those responsibilities should have a payoff. And we should be able to admit that there's a payoff in our responsibilities. If we don't have that payoff, then we've allowed decisions to make us rather than making a decision about having those responsibilities. So, yeah. Yeah, and these scientists and these academics, it's like I think they feed the neurosis of society quite a lot. If you're not familiar with the term neurosis is when people do not have the adult coping skills to handle their negative feelings, to cope with their negative feelings. Especially in America and the other NATO countries, this is huge because, the US and its allies supposedly defeated evil 80 years ago. And there's this whole idea of the end of history. We're at the end of history and things will always be great because the US and its allies just invade people they don't like and they impose so-called democracy. So when you have that mindset where you're like, oh, evil's been defeated forever. When you see something in the world that doesn't live up to your ideals, if you have this attitude, you get completely neurotic because in your head, the world is some idealized fantasy. And when the real world doesn't live up to the idealized fantasy in our heads, we can't cope with it and we get neurotic and we get overcome by our own negative feelings on something happening on television that's not even near us, doesn't even affect us. So yeah, this group, these scientists and these academics, and then the overlap between them, very very condescending, elitist, and that it's like a thing I always talk about. When you have imperial societies, imperial civilizations, civilization is a giant hypocrisy. It's like you take World War II, right? The US and the Soviets, they destroyed and conquered Germany. But mass media, through the priestly political lawyer class, have taught people how to regurgitate their hypocritical lawyerish bullshitisms. So, if you say, well, at the end of 1945, the US and Soviet conquest and destruction of Germany was complete. They go, we didn't conquer them, we liberated and occupied them. It's like bullshit like that. So, yeah, this these priests and priestesses of scientism, they're up to their eyeballs in hypocrisy. So, and this is why the university system has utterly fallen apart, because by the 60s the universities were giant summer camps where you'll learn some job skills, but you go away for 4 years to learn how to drink and do drugs and bitch about politics and get indoctrinated into whatever your university's political bias is. So that the scientists and academics we have now are trained in that environment. So no wonder the whole thing's falling apart, because it's like basically going to a woke hippie cult gathering for 4 years with plenty of drugs and alcohol. So yeah, no wonder it's falling apart. Their mission, especially this like hippie, like socialist mission that was launched in the 60s, it fucking crashed on takeoff. Cause you can't think clearly when you're under the influence every day. And slacker activism doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, these people are fucking done. Every day people are less and less inclined to go get a Mickey Mouse degree from these people. We'll always need people who are trained at universities, but it's just the whole thing is so watered down. The value of it is so inflated, of a degree is so inflated. So yeah, but when the industry of your country gets gutted, that's how you spackle over the damage on the foundation, is you just send everyone to college to get trained by hysterical, histrionic, neurotic scientists and academics. So yeah, I don't know how these people are going to save the world when they don't have basic human communication. They don't know how to speak to people. So yeah, they're going down the Titanic. It's all for this one. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the thumbs up there. You guys can spare a second to drop a thumbs up and a comment. Definitely helps the channel. Thanks a lot. I might do another one this afternoon. Talk to you later.